Hey everybody, thanks for joining us here on this Monday here on 9 News Watch. I'm Chris Bianchi and joined by 9 News Director of Reporting Chris Vanderveen. And today we're going to get into the Omicron variant.
Omicron. You say tomato, I say tomato. I think we're going to have a little bit of that before we sort of settle on a pronunciation, but that's sort of where we're at, right? You call it the variant, call it the new variant, you call it whatever you want.
Well, the new variant, the Omicron variant, we were talking about that just before we came on here, is obviously getting a lot of attention here. It has not, at least form my understanding as of this point, as of Monday afternoon, we have not seen it appear in the United States at this point, though a lot of indications are that we could see it in the next few weeks. But Chris, you've extensively reported here on the coronavirus over the last year and a half. You're not an epidemiologist, you're not a doctor, so we're going to focus on big picture things here. But Chris, what is your understanding about this variant based on what we've seen so far?
It's going to be here. It's going to come. I mean, it's there. There's an inevitability of it showing up. Now, just because it shows up in one or two cases, that's not a problem. I mean, you're going to see a lot of sort of blaring, screaming, seemingly dangerous headlines over the next week or so where it's in the United States. And if it's just one or two cases that pop up, that's expected. The question is, does it have the strength to edge out Delta? It's all Delta right now in the United States. Delta is the only sort of variant in the United States right now. In Colorado, it's basically 99.9% of all cases are of the Delta variant variety. And so the question is, does it have the staying power to sort of push Delta out? Because keep in mind, there's been other variants that have popped up, ones that conceivably could have been worse than Delta in terms of sickness, but Delta was able to crowd them out. And so, again, I'm not the epidemiologist here, but there's a reason for this. So it crowds it out. It's more likely to stay around, and that's what we've seen with Delta. So don't pay attention to the craziness over the next week or so about it coming. It's gonna come. It's probably already in the United States already. The question is, does it have the staying power to push Delta out?
Chris, why do you think? And I know this is a bit of a broad stroke question, so a lot of rooms for subjectivity here, but last Thursday, last Friday in particular, the stock market crashed, but went way down. There did seem to be a bit of a panic about it. Why?
Well, there should be concern. This is not to say that this is out here and it's not a concern for anybody. There should be a level of concern because we have a new variant. There's a number of changes on it that have caused some concern by really smart people, smarter than me, that say, look, this is something we need to watch. And so we're also reaching a point of COVID fatigue where people are just like over it. Like we want to move on with our lives. We want to sort of move on. We've been vaccinated. We've gotten the booster. We've worn masks. We've done everything we're supposed to do. And now we sort of want to move on. So there's that fatigue. And then somebody comes in and knocks on the door and says, hold on, maybe we're not done yet. That's the problem that we're in right now, is that sort of acknowledgement that, look, we don't know. And even, markets, for example, hate uncertainty. And there's a lot of uncertainty with this right now. Does it mean we should panic? No. Does it mean we need to hoard toilet paper? No. But it does mean we need to pay attention and see what it's capable of doing.
And speaking of which, something you were talking about just before we came on here was kind of emphasizing patience. I know you were just saying be patient about this. Roughly, are we talking weeks? Are we talking days in terms of when we'll have a better idea about this?
I think within days to weeks, we're going to have a better understanding of what it's capable of. Now, days to weeks, we're not going to see it sort of immediately crowd out Delta. But we are likely to see from a lot of research that's going on right now what it's capable of doing and what should our level of concern be. That's good information. It'll give us a better idea of is it capable of crowding Delta out? What does it do? I mean, the question is, we know Delta is really, really transmissible. We know that it's very contagious. It's much more contagious than the original strain that we had early last year. And so that's why it's been able to sort of spread very quickly, even among vaccinated populations. The question is, does it have the transmissibility of Delta and then also lead to more hospitalizations? Because Delta didn't necessarily lead to more hospitalizations per se. It was so much more transmissible that it caused more hospitalizations. But if you have an even more dangerous strain, variant of the virus, does that lead to more hospitalizations? That's really the question that needs to be answered, and hopefully we'll get a better idea of that in days to weeks.
Are there any preliminary indications from some of the countries that have been impacted yet, from Israel, from South Africa, about how the vaccine may or may not hold up to this?
So far, I think the expectation is that Delta didn't. We understood. We got a lot of information about Delta in terms of decreasing the effectiveness of the vaccine, and I think there's an expectation that it's not going to be there's going to be some waning that takes place with this new variant. The question is how much more, and I don't think we have a really good idea of that. There's been discussion that's come out of South Africa so far that says the level of sickness is not any higher than Delta, and that's good news. That's what we want to see, but it's really early. And so to draw conclusions on a small number of cases, really, and keep in mind, we talk about this a lot, hospitalizations lag by about 2 weeks. You get sick, and then a week or so later, you end up in the hospital. And because of that, people that are getting sick now, we might have to wait another week or two to see how it's really impacting the sort of the hospitalizations of this country as well. It's so new that we don't really understand. The good news is that we found it, and we're isolating it, and we're better understanding it. This would be a real problem if we found it late, and we didn't know it was coming, and all of a sudden it's sort of really entrenched in communities without us knowing and having the time to research it.
And to that, actually, if I recall, obviously you would know way better than I do. Early last summer, June, July, we found out about Delta when it was kind of circulating not only in the U.S., right? It was, if I recall, Colorado was one of the first places to be impacted by it, right?
Earlier this year. And that's one of those issues is that, I mean, we're now doing surveillance, in essence, not of all tests. This idea that if you get a test and it's done, a PCR test, a doctor's or whatever, that automatically sort of qualifies you for that additional testing to see what kind of strain it is, what kind of a variant it is. That's not happening, but they're doing testing on a limited number of tests. And to look and see, and they've been doing that in the state of Colorado, they're doing that in a number of other states. So there's a surveillance program set up to at least give us a better idea. Is it perfect? No. Does it capture every case? No. And that's why there's a thought that it's probably already here, we just haven't found it in the net yet. But the question is, can we find it and then isolate it? I think, like I said, sometime soon, maybe very soon, there's going to be that AP news alert that pops up. This variant found in X state. And maybe it'd be Colorado, maybe it'd be some other state. That's expected. Like, that's going to happen, and there's no reason to freak out over that. The question is, like I said at the beginning, how much more does it edge out Delta? That's really the pivotal question in all of this.
Is there perhaps a little bit of heightened concern that we're here at the end of November, we're heading into the holiday season, and into the kind of peak of winter when we had the huge surge during December, January, February of last year? Is that part of the concern?
Of course it is. And we already know, like here in Colorado, for example, our hospital system is already really overburdened, much more so than it was a year ago when we saw the similar wave last year. But the problem is that our hospital system is much more overburdened because there's more patients in the hospital than there were last year. We were waiting on a lot of elective surgeries. People were postponing care, good reasons, bad reasons, and therefore our hospitals weren't as busy. Now they're very busy, and there's not as much wiggle room for those hospitals. So that's really the problem sort of moving forward, is how much more wiggle room does our hospital system have?
So I guess to kind of sum this all up, I was going to ask you about day-to-day impacts, but clearly based on what you're saying, we need patience on this.
Yeah.
And how do you think that this, at this point, what do people do? I mean, is it just sit back and wait for the news to come?
That's what's going to happen, is that take the initial wave, know that it's coming, and understand there's no reason to freak out about those first few stories that pop up. What I'll be paying attention to is rate of hospitalizations. Are we seeing anything different than what we saw in Delta? Or is it causing more hospitalizations? Is it causing more deaths? Is it causing younger populations to get sick? Because there's certain things that we've known now. We've had a number of months run at Delta that we really start to understand how it works. And the good news is, so far, is it's still not getting a lot of younger people sick. Children, for the most part, we've generally had anywhere from 18 to 34 hospitalizations of kids 18 and younger in the state of Colorado at any given time. So a small percentage of the rest of the population that's in the hospital. So we know it doesn't impact the young as much as it does the old. And therefore, do we see anything different? And that's what you need to look for, is not that it's here, not that it's scary, but what is it doing that's potentially different from Delta? Because we understand Delta, we don't understand this as much, and if it's a younger population, that's a concern. If it's causing more hospitalizations or deaths, that's absolutely a concern. If it's staying the course and the vaccines are working and the boosters are working really well, that means like we're going to be okay. Like we understand this thing, but the problem is because there's so many unknowns, our mind likes to go in different directions of, oh goodness, we've already learned over the last year and a half what a lot of unknowns means. It means, oh goodness, I don't get to go to work or my school closes down, and those type of things are really personal. The key is take a deep breath, sort of, okay, I can survive that initial wave of news. Now let me see what's going to happen after that. That's pivotal right now.
So no need to make a run to Walmart and get all that toilet paper at this point. Obviously.
No need to do that just yet.
Just yet. That's some good news. I guess finally, I do want to ask you about. You did mention the strain on the current Colorado hospital system. We're in the middle of one of, if not the worst wave of COVID yet. Where do we stand right now?
I think so. We're not numbers wise. We're below. So we're probably likely to dip below 1,500 total hospitalizations today in the state of Colorado. We've been over 1,500 the last week or so, getting very close to 1,600 net. So we're starting to see that curve. Now, it doesn't mean the curve's going to go way down. I'd like to see that, but as we've had curves in the past where it go down and then pops back up again. So the question is, can we sort of see that key? Like, we've definitely seen a turning. The cases aren't rising as quickly. The hospitalizations are starting to go down. But add all of that on top of the fact that we have more patients in our hospital system. We're starting to see the flu here in Colorado. We're just starting to see some flu cases pop up. That we didn't have any flu. We essentially had no flu last year. And so does that portend sort of a flu season where we don't even get to the height of the flu season until January, February. So if we start to see an overburning on the hospital system, that's a problem. And keep in mind, when a hospital system is overburdened, you can have all the beds in the world. But if you don't have the staff to man those beds, to watch the patients in those beds, you're going to have problems. And I think we've learned that through the pandemic, that it doesn't matter how many beds you have, it matters how many people you have. People are key because people are the ones that sort of wait by the bedside and make sure that you're okay. And if you start to lose those numbers, then you have problems.
So get vaccinated, get your booster, wear a mask.
Got my booster today.
Got your booster. And you feeling all right so far?
I'm feeling great. I mean, I will see how I feel in 24 hours. I got the Moderna, I had my second shot of Moderna back in April, and it was an interesting 24 hours. It wasn't horrible. I mean, I was okay, but it was definitely felt a little sick. I'm expecting there's a real possibility of that happening tomorrow. But other than that, like, I feel good that I'm doing what I can to sort of not just protect me, but more importantly, all of us. I mean, it sounds super cliche, but we are all in this together.
Absolutely. I got my booster 2 weeks ago and had some pretty minimal impacts myself, and certainly not nearly as bad as the second shot. So, I guess I really appreciate your insight, Chris, and we'll continue to check back in with you. And also, would you mind giving out your Twitter handle as well, because you've done a wonderful job.
You sure we want to do this? Put up the Twitter handle so people can tell me how stupid I am? Yeah, it's at Chris, CHRIS Vanderveen. It's very long, Vanderveen. It's a good Dutch name. That's it. I'm only going to spell it once.
All right, Chris Vanderveen, at Chris Vanderveen on Twitter. Chris does an amazing job. Please don't send him any mean messages. We love you, Chris.
Why change the course? I mean, I get enough of those already.
No doubt about that. But again, Chris, thanks for joining us here on Tony's Watch.